"Let's pump the brakes on us," she told me after years of dating. I pumped them all the way and drove off. When she texted, "I just needed space, not a breakup," I was already gone. I discovered this message while sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Nashville, reviewing blueprints for a residential renovation project that had been keeping me busy for weeks. The email arrived at 11:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I watched 4 years of my life get casually restructured in 7 paragraphs of carefully worded corporate speak about reassessing our trajectory and needing time to process life changes. I'm a freelance architectural consultant, so I understand blueprints and structural modifications, but this felt more like controlled demolition. Vanessa explained that her fitness influencer career was exploding, brand partnerships, sponsored retreats, a potential book deal, and she felt overwhelmed by the pressure to maintain our relationship momentum while building her personal brand. The phrase, "pump the brakes," appeared 3 times, always with this casual tone like she was suggesting we order different appetizers instead of fundamentally restructuring our shared existence. She wrote about needing bandwidth to focus on personal growth and space to explore her authentic self without relationship pressure, language that sounded like it came straight from a self-help podcast transcript. I read it twice, set my coffee down, and typed back a response that would define everything that followed. Message received, brakes fully engaged. I didn't call, didn't ask for clarification, didn't suggest we meet to discuss it properly like some desperate guy clinging to a sinking ship. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching Nashville moving companies while she was probably expecting me to negotiate the terms of our slowdown like this was some kind of business merger requiring careful deliberation. By 2 p.m., I had appointments scheduled with 3 different movers for the next day, had started browsing apartment listings across town, and was methodically photographing every shared possession in our downtown loft with the systematic approach of a crime scene investigator. The leather sectional we'd picked out together after 2 months of debate, the coffee table she'd insisted would be perfect for her content shoots, the kitchen appliances we'd registered for like we were married even though we'd never taken that step because she always said she wanted to focus on her career first. I documented everything with the same attention to detail I brought to architectural surveys, creating a comprehensive inventory that would make the separation process absolutely seamless and eliminate any future disputes about who owned what during our 4-year experiment in domestic partnership. When she mentioned just slowing down and taking some time to breathe, I realized she was thinking pit stop while I was planning the exit ramp, and her casual request for space triggered something in me that I hadn't expected, not anger or desperation, but this strange sense of clarity about what I actually wanted from life and relationships. I'd spent 4 years adapting to her schedule, supporting her career ambitions, rearranging my consulting projects around her content creation needs, and apparently she viewed our relationship as another project that needed timeline adjustments rather than a partnership between equals. So I decided to give her exactly what she asked for, just with more permanence and finality than she'd probably intended when she hit send on her corporate breakup memo. Within 48 hours, I executed a complete separation plan that shocked everyone involved, including myself, with how efficiently I could dismantle 4 years of shared existence when properly motivated by someone who thought relationships operated on seasonal schedules like content calendars. I arranged for movers to pack all of Vanessa's belongings while she was at her job filming sponsored workout content for some athletic wear brand that probably paid her more in one afternoon than most people make in a month, timing it perfectly so she'd return to find her life neatly boxed and stored in a climate-controlled facility across town that I'd already paid for 3 months in advance because I believe in handling logistics properly. The apartment got professionally cleaned by a service I hired specifically to eliminate any trace of her lavender essential oil diffuser and whatever organic face masks she'd been leaving in the bathroom like territorial markers, and I collected every spare key she'd distributed to friends, yoga instructors, her personal assistant who sometimes needed access for content setup, and even her mother who had a copy, just in case of emergencies that apparently didn't include relationship. Emergencies requiring immediate intervention. All shared subscriptions got canceled with documentation sent directly to her business email. Netflix, Spotify, Hulu, the premium meal delivery service she used for her "What I Eat in a Day" videos, the meditation app she promoted but never seemed to actually use for self-reflection, Even the premium gym membership we'd split because she insisted on having access to the photogenic equipment for her fitness posts that generated thousands of likes from followers who thought her lifestyle was aspirational rather than financially unsustainable. When she returned from her sponsored yoga retreat in Sedona expecting to talk things through, like this was some minor scheduling conflict that required careful negotiation and compromise, she found her belongings replaced with a storage receipt, business card for the facility, and new locks on the door that I'd had installed by a locksmith who worked faster than her usual content creation timeline allowed for any kind of interference. Her frantic calls went straight to voicemail because I'd already signed a lease on a studio apartment across the city in a neighborhood she'd never visit, too working class for her aesthetic, not Instagram-worthy enough for her brand image, having taken her request for space to its most logical and literal extreme while she was probably posting sunset meditation photos with captions about finding clarity in stillness, without realizing that her domestic situation had achieved the ultimate clarity of complete dissolution. The efficiency of the whole operation surprised even me. Turns out when you approach relationship dissolution with the same systematic methodology you use for architectural project management, things move remarkably quickly and with minimal emotional drama or extended negotiations that might drag on for weeks while someone processes their feelings through social media posts. I'd created detailed spreadsheets tracking shared expenses, photographed every item with timestamps for legal protection, and even prepared a written summary of our financial obligations that would make any divorce attorney proud of my documentation skills and attention to potentially contentious details. Vanessa's extensive network of influencer friends, family members, and professional contacts launched a coordinated campaign to convince me I was overreacting to her reasonable request for reflection time, apparently operating under the assumption that relationships should function like collaborative content where everyone gets input on the final edit before publication. Her sister Ashley, a real estate agent who'd inherited the family talent for dramatic presentations and closing deals through emotional manipulation, started showing up at my construction sites claiming I was having a mental breakdown and needed immediate intervention from people who actually cared about my well-being, which was rich coming from someone who'd spent 4 years treating me like Vanessa's personal ATM with architectural skills and a convenient downtown apartment. The harassment escalated when her mother began calling my clients directly, suggesting I was unreliable due to personal issues that were affecting my professional judgment and might impact project timelines, forcing me to change my business phone number and email address while explaining to confused homeowners that my ex-girlfriend's family had launched what appeared to be a small-scale psychological warfare campaign against my consulting practice over a relationship dispute. Her best friend Brooklyn, also an influencer with a yoga lifestyle brand that promoted authentic living and mindful relationships, started a subtle social media campaign painting me as emotionally unavailable and controlling without naming me directly, posting inspirational quotes about toxic masculine energy and men who can't handle strong independent women, with timing that coincided perfectly with Vanessa's crisis management timeline and damage control efforts. The pressure intensified when her yoga studio colleagues began leaving negative reviews on my professional portfolio website, claiming I had commitment issues and anger management problems, despite the fact that none of these people had ever hired me for architectural work, met me in person, or witnessed me display anything resembling anger in any professional or personal context throughout my entire career. I watched this coordinated attack unfold with the same detached fascination I'd feel observing a building demolition, impressive in its scope and execution, certainly requiring significant planning and communication between participants, but ultimately just clearing ground for something better and more structurally sound to be constructed in its place. The most absurd part was how they'd convinced themselves that my calm, systematic response to Vanessa's brake-pumping email constituted some kind of emotional emergency requiring immediate family intervention, as if responding rationally to someone's clearly stated desire for space was a symptom of mental illness rather than basic respect for clearly communicated boundaries and adult decision-making. Brooklyn's Instagram stories became increasingly pointed and obviously targeted, featuring quotes like, "Real love means fighting for each other," and "Some people give up the moment things get challenging," always posted around sunset with carefully curated backgrounds that probably took longer to set up than our actual relationship conversations had lasted in recent months before Vanessa decided we needed professional evaluation. The situation exploded when my truck got vandalized in the parking lot of a hardware store where I was picking up materials for a bathroom renovation. Spray paint across the windshield reading "commitment issues" in bright pink letters that matched Vanessa's favorite workout gear color scheme, which seemed like an unnecessarily personal touch for what should have been random vandalism if it wasn't obviously coordinated revenge. Security footage revealed Vanessa's workout partner Drew, a personal trainer who'd always struck me as the type of guy who solved problems with his muscles instead of his brain and probably thought property destruction was an acceptable form of conflict resolution, who claimed it was a misunderstanding when confronted by police and suggested that maybe I'd damaged my own truck for attention, leading to a restraining order filing that felt both ridiculous and absolutely necessary given the escalating pattern of harassment. Her attorney sent a cease and desist letter demanding return of expensive camera equipment she'd purchased for their shared travel blog, plus compensation for business losses from our canceled collaboration deals that had apparently been worth thousands of dollars in potential revenue I'd somehow cost her by taking her request for space seriously and literally rather than interpreting it as an invitation to negotiate relationship terms. The legal battle intensified when she claimed emotional distress had affected her brand partnerships, seeking $15,000 in damages for malicious abandonment during a vulnerable period and intentional interference with business relationships. As if my decision to respect her clearly stated boundaries constituted some kind of commercial sabotage rather than basic human decency and adult communication skills. Her lawyer painted me as a vindictive ex who'd systematically destroyed her living situation and professional opportunities out of spite, conveniently omitting the part where she'd literally asked for space and I'd simply provided more than she'd expected in her wildest social media dreams or worst nightmare scenarios. My lawyer countered with evidence of her increasingly erratic behavior, documented the harassment campaign through screenshots of Brooklyn's targeted Instagram posts and Ashley's workplace interference, and threatened a defamation lawsuit if the social media attacks continued, pointing out that claiming someone has anger management problems without evidence could seriously damage a professional consultant's reputation and client relationships in an industry built on trust and reliability. 2 months later, Nashville's influencer gossip network exploded when Vanessa appeared in a luxury resort Instagram story with Marcus, a professional photographer who had been collaborating on her content for months before the breakup, posting couples' yoga poses and sunset dinner shots that looked suspiciously like the romantic getaways she'd always claimed we couldn't afford on my consulting income. Investigation by mutual friends revealed their creative partnership began 6 weeks before her "pump the brakes" email, with suspicious amounts of private messaging and late-night strategy sessions that apparently required meeting at upscale hotels to discuss lighting techniques and brand development opportunities. Her former assistant leaked information that Vanessa had been planning a rebrand around being authentically single and exploring personal growth through independence, essentially using me as a launching pad for a new content direction that would showcase her journey from committed relationship to empowered solo traveler with a mysteriously well-funded photographer companion. The timeline revealed she wanted me as a safety net while exploring this new professional and personal relationship, expecting me to wait patiently in the background like some kind of emotional insurance policy while she tested whether Marcus could provide both creative collaboration and the lifestyle upgrade she'd been craving for months. When confronted by mutual friends who'd started connecting the dots, she claimed Marcus was just helping her process the breakup and providing professional support during a difficult transition, but matching vacation posts from Cabo San Lucas told a completely different story about their working relationship and creative process. The most insulting part was discovering that her "overwhelmed by relationship pressure" narrative had been complete fiction designed to create space for this transition without having to admit she'd been emotionally checked out and planning her exit strategy while I was still bringing her coffee in bed and listening to her complaints about difficult clients. Her Instagram captions during this period became increasingly transparent about her true motivations, featuring quotes about knowing your worth and never settling for less than you deserve, which apparently meant trading a stable relationship with an architect for adventures with a photographer who specialized in lifestyle content and had enough disposable income to fund spontaneous international trips. Marcus turned out to be everything I wasn't: independently wealthy from family money, available for last-minute travel, and completely focused on creating the kind of aspirational content that would elevate Vanessa's brand from local fitness influencer to international lifestyle guru with a carefully curated aesthetic. The revelation that she'd been planning this transition for months while still living in our shared apartment and accepting my financial support for her business development made me realize that her request to pump the brakes hadn't been about relationship anxiety. It had been about timing her exit to coincide with her new opportunities without burning bridges she might need to cross again if things didn't work out with her upgrade. When her influencer career stagnated and Marcus moved on to promote another lifestyle blogger with fresher content ideas and probably fewer legal complications, Vanessa launched an elaborate reconciliation campaign disguised as personal growth content that fooled absolutely no one who'd been paying attention to her recent pattern of strategic relationship decisions. She created a series of Instagram stories about learning from mistakes and appreciating what you had, clearly directed at me, while maintaining plausible deniability to her followers who probably thought she was sharing generic wisdom about gratitude and self-reflection rather than damage control messaging. Her family members started reaching out with carefully rehearsed reports that she'd learned so much about herself and realized she made the biggest mistake of her life, using language that sounded like it came from a crisis management playbook rather than genuine family concern about her emotional well-being. The campaign culminated in her showing up at a construction site where I was consulting on a kitchen renovation, claiming she just happened to be in the neighborhood for a mindfulness walk through an industrial area that contained absolutely nothing except warehouses and construction equipment that would interest someone on a spiritual journey. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, appearing beside my truck while I was loading tools, wearing the kind of carefully casual outfit that suggested this encounter had been planned rather than spontaneous. "About us, about what I threw away when I got scared of how real things were getting." I continued securing my equipment, not particularly interested in whatever script she'd prepared for this moment. "Marcus and I were never serious," she continued, apparently unaware that I'd seen enough of their social media documentation to know exactly how serious their collaborative relationship had become. "It was just a distraction from dealing with my fear of commitment, and I realize now that running away from you was the worst decision I've ever made." She attempted to frame their reunion as destiny and personal evolution, talking about how the universe had brought us back together and how she'd learned to value stability and genuine partnership over excitement and adventure. But I recognized it as damage control after her backup plan had failed spectacularly when Marcus discovered that her brand partnerships were declining and her content wasn't generating the engagement rates he needed for his own professional advancement. The most transparent part of her performance was how she kept mentioning all the personal growth work she'd been doing: the therapy sessions, the meditation retreats, the journaling about our relationship, as if emotional development was some kind of achievement certificate she could present to earn readmission to my life rather than an ongoing process that should have been happening during our 4 years together. In their final confrontation at a farmer's market in East Nashville, she made one last attempt at reconciliation by claiming their breakup taught her what she really wanted in life, apparently expecting me to be impressed by her newfound clarity about the value of stable relationships with financially responsible partners who didn't require constant validation through social media content. "I know I hurt you," she said, intercepting me near a vendor selling handmade furniture that reminded me why I'd moved to this neighborhood: real craftsmanship by people who built things to last rather than creating disposable content for temporary engagement. "But everything that happened was necessary for my growth, and now I can be the partner you always deserved because I understand what we had." I calmly explained that her request to pump the brakes had led me to discover I preferred driving solo, and her current crisis wasn't my emergency to solve since I'd learned to distinguish between someone asking for help and someone expecting rescue from consequences they'd created themselves. "You're being completely unreasonable," she said, voice rising as other shoppers started glancing over at what was becoming a public scene. "People make mistakes. Relationships require forgiveness and second chances, especially when someone's willing to admit they were wrong and commit to changing." When she accused me of being unforgiving and holding grudges, I pointed out that forgiveness doesn't require reconnection, and wisdom means learning from patterns rather than repeating them with people who view relationships as experiments in personal branding rather than partnerships between equals building something meaningful together. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, abandoning her carefully practiced vulnerability routine. "You're throwing away 4 years over a few months of confusion, and for what? To prove some point about being right." I returned her grandmother's ring that she'd left behind during the great storage facility relocation, telling her I hoped she found whatever she was really looking for, and walked away while she argued with my retreating figure about how I was making the biggest mistake of my life by letting pride interfere with true love. 6 months later, I was thriving in my relocated business, had started dating Rachel, a fellow architect who appreciated direct communication and had never once suggested our relationship needed seasonal evaluation or strategic rebranding for optimal personal growth outcomes. I watched Vanessa's continued influencer drama from the comfortable distance of someone who chose the exit ramp at exactly the right time, noting that she'd moved through 2 more photographers, a life coach, and was currently promoting a new relationship with someone who specialized in cryptocurrency investments and apparently funded her lifestyle through methods that didn't require consistent content creation or brand partnership maintenance. Rachel and I were planning a renovation project on a house we'd purchased together, making decisions based on what we wanted to build rather than what would photograph well for social media, and I realized that pumping the brakes had been the best relationship advice Vanessa ever gave me. It just took her a while to understand that some people actually follow through when someone asks for space. The irony reached peak levels when she accused me of being emotionally abusive for refusing to communicate after she'd spent weeks having her friends and family contact me instead of picking up the phone herself, apparently expecting me to chase after someone who'd made it clear that our relationship needed to be put on hold for her personal growth journey and spiritual development. Drew's vandalism incident cost him a job at an upscale gym where several of my clients were members, and when word spread about the legal drama, Vanessa started losing followers who found the whole situation unprofessional and damaging to her carefully cultivated brand image of mindful living and positive relationships built on mutual respect rather than legal threats.